Today we are going to be finishing up our Learning Target 1 from Unit 5, which is I can verify congruency through a sequence of translations, rotations, and reflections. Previously we've talked about translations, which have been where we take our pre-image and we slide it across our coordinate grid. We've talked about reflections, which is where we take our pre-image and we flip it across a line of reflection. And today we're going to be talking about rotations, which is where we are going to take our pre-image and turn it to create our image. And it's important that when we are rotating, that we are turning our figure about a fixed point known as the center of rotation. So in order to do this, we need to all be using an advanced mathematical tool known as patty paper. And patty paper is known as such because it looks very similar, or is, the paper that is put in between hamburger patties before you freeze them so they don't stick together. But the benefit of patty paper is it's actually opaque to where we are able to see something and trace and then turn to help us with our rotation. So for step 1 for rotations, we're going to use our tracing paper to trace the center of rotation, the vertical and horizontal lines that intersect that center of rotation, and the points that you are rotating. Okay, so if we look at our grid here, we are going to make our origin the center of rotation. So I'm going to take my patty paper and I'm going to place it over the coordinate grid. I'm going to trace my center of rotation at the origin. I'm going to trace the vertical and horizontal lines that intersect that center of rotation. And then I am going to trace the point or figure that I am rotating. So my next step says to turn the tracing paper in the direction of the rotation, whether it be clockwise, which is following the pattern of a clock, or counterclockwise, which is going against the pattern of a clock, and then lining up the lines that you drew with each rotation. So each time the lines match up, that's going to be a 90-degree rotation. So right here, if I wanted to rotate my figure 90 degrees clockwise, I am going to turn to the right, turn my paper to the right, and once my lines and center of rotation match up again, that has been a 90 degrees clockwise rotation. And we can see that our image of our point from before is at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -2. So I can lift up the patty paper and go to 5, -2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. And that is going to be my image after a 90 degrees clockwise rotation. Okay, I'm going to turn this back to my original point. If I wanted to rotate my pre-image 180 degrees clockwise, I'm going to turn my paper. So the first time it lines up, that's 90 degrees. I'm going to turn it once again, and 90 plus 90 is 180 degrees. So I can now see that my rotated image is going to be at -2, -5. So I lift up my paper and I go to -2, -5. And that's going to be my 180 degrees rotation. Now I don't need to actually write clockwise or counterclockwise for that, because regardless of which direction I turn it, 180 degrees is always going to end up in the same place. Okay, if I go back to my original and I ask for a 270 degree rotation clockwise, I turn the paper one rotation, that's 90 degrees. Another rotation, that's 180 degrees. And my last rotation here would be 270 degrees. So if I look at my points, that's going to be at -5, +2. I pull my paper back or remove it, go to -5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to +2. And that is going to be a 270 degrees clockwise rotation. All right. If I were doing counterclockwise, counterclockwise goes against the clock. So if I were to do a 90 degrees counterclockwise motion, I'm going to turn my paper to the left, and you should notice that my 90 degrees counterclockwise motion landed us in the exact same spot as the 270 degree clockwise motion. So that's 90 degrees counterclockwise, the same exact point. If I were to, like I said before, rotate 180 degrees counterclockwise, it would end up in the exact same place as our 180 degrees clockwise. And if I were to rotate 270 degrees counterclockwise, I'm going to turn 1, 2, 3, and that's going to land in the exact same place as 90 degrees clockwise. If the directions do not specify which direction they want you to turn it, you need to always assume counterclockwise. So unless it is specifically stated to turn or to rotate your point clockwise, you're always going to be rotating counterclockwise. All right. I did add at the bottom of the paper some general rules for rotations. You can see how the points relate. However, we will not be doing any rotations without using patty paper. So that's just for your general information. All right, let's flip the page and look at our first example. All right, so example 1, rotations about the origin. So if I want to rotate triangle ABC 90 degrees about the origin, notice it did not tell me which direction, so I need to assume counterclockwise. So let's put the names of our points, or the labels of our points. So A is at 1, 2, B is at 3, 3, and C is at 2, 1. So I'm going to take my paper and I'm going to trace the origin because that's my center of rotation. I'm going to trace the vertical line that intersects the origin, which is our y-axis, and I'm going to trace the horizontal line that intersects the origin, which is our x-axis, and then I am going to trace the points that I will be rotating. It's not really important that you trace the whole figure but you definitely need to have the points. I would also highly recommend labeling the points prior to your rotation. Okay, so we are being asked to rotate 90 degrees. We are assuming counterclockwise about the origin. So that means I'm going to be turning one turn to the left. If I do that, I line up my origin, I line up my X and Y axis, and I can now see that A maps to -2, 1. I'm going to record that here, -2, 1. B maps to -3, 3. So B maps to -3, 3. And C maps to -1, 2. So -1, 2. And then I can remove my paper and actually record those. So -2, 1. I label it A prime. Don't forget those tick marks. B is at -3, 3. And C is at -1, 2. And then we're going to connect our points. Okay. If I look at my next set of directions, it says rotate triangle ABC 270 degrees about the origin. Again, we're going to assume counterclockwise because it does not specify that it wants us to turn the paper or rotate clockwise. So my points are the same. Notice there's no tick marks in this name here, which means we are starting back with the original. So A is at 1, 2, B is at 3, 3, C is at 2, 1. So the nice thing is I don't have to retrace anything. I'm going to put my original back to where my original maps to the original pre-image. And for 270 degrees counterclockwise about the origin, that's going to be 3 rotations to the left. So 1, 2, 3. And I can now see that A has mapped to 2, -1, 2, -1. B has mapped to 3, -3. And C has mapped to 1, -2. So I'm going to lift my paper up and then record those on my grid. So 2, -1. That's A double prime. This is the second time, or the second image of the original. B is at 3, -3. So B double prime, it's the second image of our original. And C 1, -2. So C double prime because it is the second rotation of our original. Okay. And then lastly, we are asked to rotate our original, our pre-image triangle ABC 180 degrees about the origin. It does not matter which direction, although since it does not say, we would assume counterclockwise. We're going to be using our same original points, 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. We don't have to retrace anything, so we line up our origin, we line up the axes, we line up our pre-image, and then we rotate 180 degrees, which will be 2 turns to the left. So 1 and 2. Okay, so A maps to -1, -2. B maps to -3, -3. And C maps to -2, -1. So I remove my paper and I add those to my graph. So triple image of A is -1, -2. It's A third prime. B is at -3, -3. And then C is at -2, -1. And then connect your points. So that is an example of rotations about the origin. Now, the origin is not always going to be your center of rotation. So if we look at example 2, this is an example of that scenario. So our directions say rotate ABCD 90 degrees about vertex C. Then give the coordinates of the vertices for the image of ABCD. So before we get too bogged down with all the details, let's just record our points. A is at 2, 1. B is at 0, -1. C is at 1, -2. And D is at 4, 2. And we're told we want to rotate it 90 degrees. It does not specify, so we are going to assume counterclockwise. But this time, instead of rotating about the origin, we are rotating about vertex C. So I'm going to take my paper. I'm going to locate point C. Point C is right here. Notice, it's not the origin, it's point C. So we are going to draw the vertical line and trace the vertical line that intersects point C, and we are going to trace the horizontal line that intersects point C. So you should notice it looks similar to when we traced the origin. However, based off of how it is sitting on our grid, we can see that it's not the origin. It's actually vertex C. And then I'm going to trace and record the other points. And this is point C. Okay, so if I am rotating 90 degrees counterclockwise, I'm going to take my paper and I'm going to rotate it to the left 1 turn, making sure that after I do that, I line back up point C with the vertical and horizontal lines that intersect it. So I'm going to turn it. And line it up with that vertical and horizontal line. And then I can see, oops, this is where it takes a little precision. You don't want your paper to slide to where it would not give you the correct point. Okay, so B maps to 0, -3. A mapped to -2, -1. Notice C, since it was our center of rotation, stayed the same. And then D mapped to -3, 1. So I'm going to map those onto my figure. Okay, you'll notice that I paused it so that I could create the figure just to tighten up our time here. So you'll notice that I labeled my new image with A prime, B prime. Even though C stayed the same, I'm still going to label it as the new point because it is part of the new figure, and then D prime. So our last portion says rotate the image of ABCD 270 degrees clockwise about vertex D. Then give the coordinates for the vertices of A double prime, B double prime, C double prime, D double prime. Okay, so I'm going to take the last corner of my paper, and if you need an extra sheet, just ask. I'm going to put my paper on top of point D. I want to make sure that my patty paper is able to cover all of the points that I'm going to be tracing. So point D, vertex D, is right here. So the vertical line that crosses through that is right there. The horizontal line that crosses through is right there. And then I'm going to trace my A prime, my B prime, and my C prime, and then D prime. And then I'm going to be rotating 270 degrees clockwise. So that means that I'm going to be going to the right 3 turns. So 1, make sure I line it up. 1, 2, and 3. Again, making sure that I'm lining up the vertical and horizontal lines that cross through that center of rotation. And then I can see that my new point A is at -1, 2. My new point B is at 1, 4. My image of C is at 0, 5. And the image of D should stay the exact same at -3, 1. Alright, so you can see there that I connected my points. I labeled them with my double prime, and I filled in my points here as well, which I had actually missed before we started that second portion. That's it for this lesson. Make sure you've copied everything and be ready with questions. See you later.